My name is Jerry O'Brien. I'm the director of our Center for Retailing here on campus. You know, one of the fun things about my industry is how critical it is that we try to include everybody. It's actually always been one of my favorite things. That the industry does best when everyone has a voice, when everyone feels served. And I was just chatting with the ladies before that, you know, when I was one of the students here in class, I thought we were working on these things, and by the time my kids graduated from college, maybe some of these topics would have passed. Unfortunately, the topics aren't passed, but fortunately, the conversations are becoming much more public, and I'm really excited to give people the chance. So students, I often use the phrase, a cheap lesson. A cheap lesson is when somebody else went through it, and you can learn, so you didn't have the pain. Okay? And sometimes we're not observant enough to take the cheap lessons. So we see something happen and we say, well, it didn't happen to us, and we don't let it be absorbed. I talk to my children about this all the time. You know, if I screw up, watch it closely and don't do that. You don't need to live through the pain. So today, you're going to get a chance to be part of a conversation that we're going to have here, and there's going to be cheap lessons in it, things that you can avoid. There's also going to be hopeful and aspirational comments that I'm really excited about. I want to introduce Lori Dupree-Brown, who is going to be our moderator for the conversation, and Hallie and Teresa and Lorna and Rita are your panel. They're going to do a more detailed introduction, so I don't want to get into their bios right now, but if you'll welcome Lori up here to take the mic, I get to sit down and just watch. Here you go. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you all so much for being here. The 4W Women and Wellbeing Initiative stands for Women and Wellbeing in Wisconsin and the World. And we do a lot of programs around the world. But one of the things that's very close to my heart are the things that we explore and do in Wisconsin as well. Because if you don't get that right, the place right next to you, the people you can touch, you're probably not going to be very effective in your global work either. So making the local, the personal to local to global connection is really a big part of what it's about. When we think about the consumer space from a 4W lens, we want you to thrive there, we want you to own that space, and we want you to transform it. Those are three things, right? Thriving, owning, and transforming. And so our dream over time is to think about, there's so many entry-level workers in the retail space. What can that sector be doing for those workers to enhance their well-being, quality of life? Housing, mental health, job skills, friendships, community. There's so much more that could be happening in that space. Another thing we think about is how can people who've spent time in that space craft their own lives in a creative way and try to maybe lead in that space in a different way. And I think that's really a lot of what today's talk is about. People knowing themselves and figuring out how to be themselves and fully express their talents in the consumer space in all different ways from all different stages of life. So you're going to love this. And then the third thing is, even as consumers, how can we think about transforming society by affirming these spaces and thinking about the deep meaning of our purchases? So is a beautiful dress just a pretty one? Or is a beautiful dress one that there's been dignity for workers from when the cotton was cultivated to how the land was cared for, to how every worker along the chain experienced their lives, to how you as young people who might wear those dresses feel walking around your campus, you know, feeling safe in that beautiful dress, right? So there's so many ways that a dress can be really beautiful. And I'm just thinking of dress, that's just one thing. There's so many other things we purchase and do in the consumer space. And we as people and we as women have a lot of power in that space. And if we're not conscious of the meanings of how we interact in that space, we're losing an opportunity to make life better for women and make the world better for all. So that's kind of why we have this conversation. I wanted these folks to tell themselves about you, and their bios are amazing. And if you read about them, you'd just be scared, like, give up, you'll never be like that. So I didn't want them to tell the bio the way you do when you're framing your story, you know, for fame. It's inaccessible, right? The real jagged path The truth of our story, we keep reshaping it as we look back. My resume sounds great. Living it, you'd feel it was much more accessible to you, I promise. You know, I made mistakes, I did some really stupid things that I learned a lot from, did some smart things that I'm proud of, all that. So I thought, now Jerry's going to be happy because I'm actually doing what I threatened to do. I thought we would ask these, and I wanted to make it fun for them. So I want them to tell their story in a way they hadn't before. So we're going to pretend that they are talking to themselves at 20 years old, right there in that chair. What does that wonderful young woman who has so much to offer this world, what does she need to know? What are the things that she doesn't see about herself? What do you wish she knew? What do you want to affirm about her? What is your message to her? And that's a message to you as well, because some of you are her, and some of you have people like her in your lives. And we should all go home and talk to ourselves, is part of the message here. So with that, I'm going to go in the order that I met you, just because you're lined up that way as well. Haley, would you be so kind as to start us off?
With bio, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So my name's Hallie Jones. I own the Purple Goose. It's a retail store in Verona, Wisconsin. If you don't know where Verona is, it's about 25 minutes from here, southwest. I started off my career after I graduated from business school, 1995. I don't even know how many years ago that was, but 1995, and I had a business degree, and I thought I wanted to do human resources. Well, I couldn't find a job in human resources, so I did some accounting for a while. Then I found my job in human resources, and that was fine and great, but that wasn't the end-all be-all for me, so I went into marketing. That got some traction, got really interested in marketing, and the company I was with offered to pay for me to go back to school to get my MBA. Had they not offered to pay for it, I probably wouldn't have done it, but I was able to get my MBA here at UW-Madison, which was a great experience. I did the evening program, which used to be relatively new. It's not so new anymore. Then I started to have a family. So I started with my first son and then my second son. And I realized that the corporate life was really difficult for somebody who wanted to raise a family. So I started looking at other things. And I started a business with one of my business classmates from that I had graduated with. And we did, you know, a small business together. Still, it wasn't quite hitting home with me. And then I decided, you know, I needed to start using my business degree to figure out what there was out there, what people needed. And I started doing some surveys to women in my life, people that I knew at playgroups, people that I knew just from other people's circles. And I started collecting some data, because that's what business people do. And I put all the data together and I said, I'm gonna open a store. And you know, you might say, well, you could open a store without a business degree. Yes, you could. But I would say in hindsight, my business degree and my experience in the corporate world really made it a lot easier for me to get started owning my own business. Then I opened my store and boom, baby number 3 came less than a year later. And I forgot to mention that I actually talked my husband into selling our house and living above the store. So that was a big, like, wow, life change, right?
Yeah. Wow.
So that was interesting, and we made that work for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And then I remember the day that I knew that was over. My then 3 or 4-year-old was, you know, the store was busy, which is what I wanted it to be at that point. And he was standing behind me. I didn't know what he was holding, but it was like the 6th time he had asked me to make him oatmeal, because again, we're living at the store. And a woman had come in and she was talking to me, and I found out she was the principal from across the street, and he's standing behind me with a butcher knife. I want oatmeal. Because he'd asked for it 3 times already, and I said, okay, honey, just a minute. So that was the day that I realized we needed to move out. So we moved out, store is still going, we don't live there anymore. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, my story to how I got to opening a store. But there's a lot more stories I'll share with you later.
I'm Teresa Saki, and I'm also a UW grad, but from way back when. So I went here and also FIT out in New York and got my apparel design degrees. I did go out to California right after college and spent thought I was going to maybe relocate out there. I said no after 3 days. I was nauseous from the air quality. It's not that bad today, but it was really bad in the 70s. So I did move back here, and not sure, for about 2 years, right after I got out of school, I did retail management for Kmart Apparel and the limited stores. So I kind of got under my belt a little bit of that management experience and retail experience. But as I was working at the limited stores, I had my first daughter. I worked up to due date. And everyone around me said, it's time for you to go. Your due date is today. You finally have to get out of here. I came back, and within a few months of coming back, I said, just like you, it does not work. You can't have an infant and be doing those kind of hours. So I said, I'm going to do what I know, which was design. And in 1981, I opened up a custom apparel boutique, or that people came to me and they had their custom things done. I was making wedding dresses, leather coats, formal dresses, you name it. And it worked. I was booked about 9 months out all the time. So I could be highly, highly selective on who I worked with. And I did that for quite a few years. I almost did go to Land's End, and when I realized that I'd be the first one out of the house, last one home, and still had 2 children at home, I passed, and I still did that. Well, this business progressed to a point. I had a made-to-order line that was being made in Chicago. It really turned into something. So people that knew me said, okay, you got to take it to the next step. Well, what's that next step? So I had some advisors work with me, about 6 people that met with me from all different backgrounds, marketing, accounting, business. And after we met a few times, and I talked to people that had owned stores, they somehow talked me into expanding and starting a store that originally had my designs in it and some retail. The store opened within the first month or 2. Everything with my label on it was gone. And we all were looking at each other going, okay, we have a store and it needs to be full because you still got to pay rent. You need product in here. You need to move this product. So I turned into a full-time buyer back in 2003. And the business grew 2 years after we opened. We doubled our size. We were in Hilldale for 10 years, and the last 3 years we moved into our own building outside of Westtown, and that's where we are today. We're a better to designer bridge price point store. And when I opened the store, I knew exactly who my customer was, and it's still that customer today. It was a mature woman that, might be 40 to 65, maybe professional, busy social life. That was the customer that I felt was underserved in the retail world. So that's what we opened with, and we're still kind of catering to that today, although I'm seeing a lot more mothers and daughters shopping together and having a great time in there. We've won about, we've several gold Best of Madison awards. So I feel like we did something for Madison and the community that I feel pretty good about. It's almost 15 years that I've had this store. I would have never guessed it when I graduated from college. And I feel very fortunate, that I did my design work for over 20 some years and then now have evolved into this. So, yeah.
Well, my name's Lorna Nagler, and I am a proud retail major from the University of Wisconsin. I had the opportunity, when I graduated in 1978, yes, you can all do the math, but when I graduated in 1978, women and careers was kind of a foreign concept. There actually was a magazine that came out that was called Working Woman to give women, an idea of how to work in the workforce. So little did I know that when I started on my journey in retail, that I'd go from executive training program to president and CEO throughout the course of many retailers along the way. And I guess to take the cue of what would I tell my 20-something self, other than I'm not going to go through my resume, but I would say that I didn't know that if you found something you were really passionate about, a job would become a career, and I'm a testament to that. 2, I'd tell my 20-year-old something self that you know, you reserve the right to get smarter every day. You don't always have the answers. Even as a boss or a leader, that's why you have a team. And with retail, that's so fluid and things that change each and every day. You know, you have to know that things are gonna be, you know, changing. So it's okay not to know everything. Oops, I think I'm having trouble with mine. I think the third thing I'd say is I think the difference between being successful and not in retailing, for me, is being a great leader. And that's not something anyone teaches you, but you learn pretty quickly then once you become a buyer and then you progress in your career, that if you can't get a team to work for you, and you can't get them inspired and lead them, it doesn't matter how hard you work and how passionate you are, it's the team that is successful. I think the other lesson I'd tell myself was hire the smartest darn people you can find. People are so important to your success. Don't be threatened by somebody. Hire people that have different points of view and different thoughts, because that's what makes a really, really great team. And also, you know, if anyone looked at my resume, you'd see that I moved companies quite frequently. So I'd say take those risks. And I didn't move for money. I moved because I thought the job was something that was more interesting, that was elevating my experience or expanding. So, you know, take those risks, but don't just do it for money. Oops. Money is like the last thing you should be you know, changing a job for. I think the other thing I'd say is when you start something new, I don't care what it is, a class or a new job, you have this fresh perspective and you see things much clearer than when you look at it every single day. So there was Jack Welch, who was the CEO of GE. He used to say, he'd ask his executives to start every day as if it was their first day on the job, because you'd always keep that fresh perspective of noticing what to do, having that intellectual curiosity instead of just you know, being satisfied with the status quo. So you know, I'm really excited about the journey I've had, and I think, you know, one thing about retail is that you really can learn a lot of it on the job, and I think the kind of bosses you have, good and bad, help shape you in your career. And retail, every day you get a report card from the customer. It's called daily sales. So you always know if you're having a good day or a bad day, and I think that's what kept me passionate and excited about this career for almost 40 years. So today I'm retired down in Florida, but I am on the board of Alta, and we'll be joining a couple other boards. So I still can't get rid of the retail bug. I'm just doing it at a little bit different distance. So.
Hi everyone, my name is Rita. My bio is definitely a lot shorter than everyone else's, but I'm a computer science major here at UW-Madison. I'm a junior. And so I know like everyone tells their lemonade story as an entrepreneur, but I remember when my dad told me, you can make money off of collecting aluminum cans. And I remember digging in my trash when I was it was not yesterday, it was elementary school, by the way. I should clarify that. I remember in elementary school, I would like dig through the trash, and my dad walked out, he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm trying to make money from cans. And then he would say, okay, why don't we just wake up 6 in the morning and just go walk around the neighborhood and collect cans? So like from such an early age, I was taught how to be an entrepreneur, and even something as small as collecting cans, I probably would not be doing that right now. But it just taught me how to be independent. And then afterwards, I decided that I wanted to make a note card app in high school, and that wasn't as successful as how I wanted it to be, but I eventually went to like an international business accelerator, and it helped me so much. So even though like you have many ideas, especially as a college student, and I even struggled with like finding my purpose and who I was. You're going to fail a lot, and you're going to have to figure things out, and it's okay to not know everything. And I feel like especially as millennials, we just look on social media and compare ourselves to like Mark Zuckerberg and like, why am I not a billionaire right now? And I'm like, I just woke up today, like I didn't do anything. So it's just, for me, it's really starting out on my entrepreneurial journey. Over this summer, I interned at JP Morgan as a tech analyst. So I was working on their trading software, and I had the experience working in corporate life. I would talk more about that later. But it's just knowing that it's okay to not know what you want to do. And I think especially in college, we're forced to pick a major. And I think that's unfortunate because I have so many things that I'm passionate in and something that you have to figure out. And that's not the thing that I like hearing from people, that you're going to have to figure it out by doing things. And so right now, I am helping businesses create mobile apps and websites. And my mission is really to help people put their best work into the world. So I know that this purpose may evolve throughout life, and how I'm trying to show my purpose will evolve, but just being okay with that and just trying new things. So yes, I don't have a huge bio, but I'm really here to talk about my experiences.
So we want to go a little deeper with this gang, and I get to kind of pretend I'm Oprah here, and we're going to facilitate a little bit of a conversation between the four of them, and talk about some questions that we think you might have, and then I think later there'll be a little time for you to comment or ask questions as well. But I do encourage everybody to go home and talk to your past and future self a little bit, and think about, what do you really want to do in this space? As you can see, there's some really amazing success stories here. People who are very successful are also very humble. So if you notice, there wasn't a lot of aggrandizing comments, because it's just there. The proof is in the pudding, or in the business, or in the work they've done. So, but the first question I want to talk about is, you've all had some time with some sort of local dimensions to your business, and really, let's think about what that means in our society today. What does it really mean to be a local business, and how does that contribute to well-being and health and quality of life for the community when you make that decision to be small, be local, and have relationship with your customers?
You want me to start with that one?
Sure, Haley,
You
thanks.
guys hear me okay with this? Yeah? Well, I think when you have a local business, you have the opportunity to shape your community, and not just within the walls of your store or your business, but there's so many ways to reach out in the community to other local businesses, and collaborate on, projects and events, and, maybe do just, a two-way collaboration with you in another store, or, get involved in your local chamber and put on community events for families with, your volunteer hours and the resources that you have. Another big way that I have felt that I've really impacted my community is through my staff. They all live, within, 10 miles of the store. And I've never put out like a help wanted ad or anything like that. People have just had a way of finding me, or I've had a way of finding them. And it can be like really simple things, like, a customer at checkout saying, let me know if you ever need help, just a comment like that. And I, start to think, gosh, well, I'm pretty well staffed, but could I use that person? And then I reach back out to them and say, well, what do you like to do? I don't know, I like to design houses. That's, I'm an interior design major by trade, but I stay home with my kids right now. Okay, well, we could always use help with displays. When do you want to work? Well, Sundays are really the only day I can work. Well, we could open Sundays. If you want to work every Sunday, yeah, I can work every Sunday, 12 to 4, sure. So this person that I'm talking about, she only worked for me for a year, then she moved to Omaha. And when she left, she said, you changed my life. And I said, by heaven, you work on Sundays? And she said, yeah, because now and while she was working for me too, she started this little side thing in her garage, painting signs and just doing different creative things, because she realized like it was fun to sell things, and it was fun to create things, and it sort of started stirring up this passion in her that she had, that she had forgotten about. And now she has this really successful business that she's doing with her 4 kids, in her garage still. But she's on Etsy, and she has a website, and she probably makes more money than I do. Like, she's just really, really incredible. And then another experience I had, which was just crazy, opened up the newspaper one day, and I'm reading, about one of our local artists that got an award from Martha Stewart. and it's in the capital newspapers. And I owe it all to Hallie Jones at the Purple Goose. What? So I literally message her, like, how is it that you owe your Martha Stewart Award to me? And she's like, because I came into you that one day and I showed you some cards that I made, and you told me you have to sell these. And she was like, really? Like, you have to sell these. Yeah, they're great. I'll sell them. Just bring me some. I'll sell them. So I put out her stationery, and every time she brought me something new, I said, yeah, let's try it. Yeah, let's try it. And it just kept selling to the point where she couldn't even have time to bring me stuff anymore. Her business was like crazy busy. And again, she got the award from Martha Stewart. She was like a runner-up of one of the 10 finalists across the country for, I don't follow Martha Stewart that well, so I'm not quite sure what it was. But the fact that she credited me with that made me realize it's the little things that we do in life that matter so much to people. It didn't take me anything to do that for her, but in her mind that resonated so big for her, and it was the catalyst for her to pursue her dream. So those are just a couple stories. Again, I have many more, but I want the other panelists to have a chance to answer that.
Thank you. It's so interesting how much we can do in the personal and local space. So, does anybody else want to have anything to share about that local?
I'll keep it short though, because I know we have to keep going, but I think being a local store is really important to the people that live in the community too. There's a big shop local contingent, I think, in Madison. But also, I've worked at corporate, and being the local, you have total control over how you spend your time and what you do in the community. Tomorrow night, we're one of the sponsors for the Days Fashion Show, the domestic abuse fashion show that happens every year, and that's a big fundraiser. Maybe the corporate stores, they don't get involved in that type of community involvement. Or the Carbone Cancer next month will also help and be part of their marketplace to fundraise and do things like that. I just want to mention, you mentioned employees. All of our employees have college degrees. So rare in retail. I'm not sure exactly how and why this all happened. They all said because they gravitate. That's all right. For some reason they've gravitated to our store. They love the client base. It also has been a place of respite for some of the women that work at the store. They have said that. They said their lives can be so stressful, so many challenges. And they said, when I come here for my 4 hours or whatever their shift is, they said, it's just such a wonderful place. And I think that I just feel good about that it's not only wonderful for them, but also hopefully, to the customer too.
Well, I think that goes back to the truly beautiful dress, because when you buy something in a store that shows those values about people and about the community, you think about it when you wear the dress, as well as all the other things. So, and I know you're not doing that in an intentional, but it's just, it becomes part of what the dress means to someone. So that's really neat. Anybody else want to talk about the local?
I would just say it's kind of ironic that, in the retail span, there used to be a local department store. There used to be something that, every hometown knew it was Gimbel's or it was Boston Store. And now, 40 years later, localization is so important. So these big corporations like, Kohl's, et cetera, are trying to localize their assortment. And so really the gems, of those local people really understand the community that they represent. It's the reason why you're so successful is because people love to find something that is really unique and special and cared for people in a way that, is from the community. So it's kind of ironic that we've come full circle as a retail world from, local to global, and really what people want is something unique and special and that represents their community.
If I could just add one more thing about the local. When I first started, I had a mentor who meant a lot to me, and I stumbled upon her store when I was at my corporate job. 14 years ago, her tagline for her store was "Experience the shop." And now what is everybody talking about? How retail is about experience. And it resonates so much with me because big ideas happen in small places. So if I were to talk about what I would tell my 20-year-old self is, don't be afraid of having big ideas, even when you feel like your scope is small. we may not have the marketing dollars or the resources to get our message out there all the time. That doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Still do what you think is right.
And Haley has a motto that I'm going to close this part, which is love local, right?
Yeah.
So love local, everybody. Now, we wouldn't be 4W if we didn't try to have edge and boldness and all that. So a second question is, in terms of expressing all of yourself and all of your talents and how complex life is it possible to strike a balance between using all your talents in your professional life and thriving in your personal life as well? And what are the synergies and trade-offs in the space, in this consumer space that you're in?
I'll start on that one because I think I have a good example, and I can also speak for a daughter that graduated from the UW too, who's younger and has the little kids right now and deals with it. I made a choice that I didn't even think too hard about when I started to have my family. I always said that they came first, the job was second. So I do feel like I could have gone the corporate route. I think I could have pulled it off. But I don't think I could have done both, at least not in the 70s. And I say at least not in the 70s because we didn't have the Primrose preschools and these fancy places for all of these young children to go that are there today. But I still got to design clothing every single day. I used my degree every single day. You know, so I felt like I could kind of do both. But it's challenging, and you guys will face those kind of decisions when you're out there, and it could go in different ways. I have a daughter that's, let's say she's 35, and has 2 little boys. She has never not worked in a professional job since she had those kids, and I don't know how she does it, and the kids are perfect and wonderful, but they pay for care. So, you know, today I feel like you kind of can do the corporate thing because there are more great options to help, you know, pull that family caretaking role, you know. So I just think that for today's women that are going out there, I think they have a lot more options than what we had, you know, 30 some years ago. So.
And I would just add that, you know, one of the things that I had the opportunity in the last 15 years of my career is running a company. So, you know, leadership starts at the top, and how do you want, you know, to me, people who had kids, it was important for me to make sure that they knew that, you know, if they needed to leave and enjoy their family, that was important, because it made them a better employee. So it was always my philosophy that I was very flexible and made sure that people could balance their time. And the second thing is, you know, there are a lot of women as they come into the career and have to make that choice when they have kids. To me, in retail, there was always a way to keep that employee. If they didn't want to do as much travel, guess what? I could put them in a department that didn't require as much travel or move them to planning. So I always tried to be sensitive to that because women shouldn't have to choose. They should be able to have both. And with the right kind of company, you can have that ability to excel in your career and enjoy your family at the same time. So I think it really starts with the leadership of the company. Not all corporations are bad. I think that you know, how I led my companies was really to make sure that family, although I didn't have kids, it was important to me to make sure that people were really happy in what they did, and it made a much better culture and a much better successful company.
Thank you. Anybody else want to talk about work-life balance? It doesn't have to just be about children. Do you want to say something,
I guess for college students especially, like, we're sometimes just wrapped up in academics and midterms, and that's just so stressful. And you ask yourself sometimes, like, what am I even doing for fun? And especially as a computer science major. So sometimes just doing like one thing that you enjoy every day. And it doesn't have to be big like yoga. And it just makes your day a lot better. So it doesn't have to be like trying to figure out your entire life, but just figure out like what's one thing that I can do for fun every single day. Because I feel like that helps you so much.
You know, we were just, today, the board, raise your hand if we're in our meeting today, just so that some of our board members gathered today to talk about this 4W initiative. And one thing we did as part of our meeting was to stop in, and we did a tour at the Chazen Museum. And this is something you walk by all the time. But if you need just a pick-me-up of being stimulated, especially your design people, this is a feast for you. Just walk in and look at one thing and think about it and walk out, you know? It's renewal, it unplugs you, and it gets different parts of your brain. I'm speaking to myself here because I had not been there in a year, and I'm like, why don't I do this all the time? And it's just so hard to take care of yourself. Why is it hard to do things you like, you know? And so, yeah, take care of yourself, young people. I'll go on. Haley, do you want to comment on that, or shall I go on?
You know, I guess as a small business owner, you know, there's more opportunities for the children to get involved on a daily basis, whether they want to or not. I'll just tell a recent story. We had some winds come through Verona this summer, and it happened to be on the day of my semi-annual sale, which we have outside, you know, in July. And I literally pulled in at 8 to get ready for the sale that started at 9:30, and it was like limbs blocking the entrance, the driveway. I mean, it's like a tornado went through. And I thought, okay, I guess it's time to go get the boys out of bed. So loaded them up in the car. Now they're 11, 14, and 15. So they've got some muscle. They can help. They like doing this stuff better than steaming clothes now. So we got all the tools, and they were out there. But some of those limbs, I mean, they were, you know, unmovable. I mean, we have huge, huge trees outside of our building, and they were hundreds of pounds. And so they started working, and I'm thinking, oh, this isn't going to happen by 9:30. All of a sudden, you see neighbors coming over with chainsaws. You see people pulling over on the side of the road, customers, people that I know. Like, what can I do? Because they know it's my sale. I mean, I've been there for 12 years. They, you know, they're waiting for 9:30 to come. They know it's my sale. So I think for my children to see that community, you know, so not only are we giving to the community as small businesses, but we receive. I don't know how I can teach that to my children otherwise, you know. So they went home, not complaining about all the work that they had to do, but like, well, that was really nice for that guy to come over with the chainsaw. And who were all those other people? Like, you know, it was great.
And you know, I bet everybody who helped went home and felt great.
I'm sure they did.
You know, so that's wonderful. Thanks. Yeah, so small acts of kindness, take care of yourself. Be all you can be. The next question we have, because I think about, you know, you want to be leaders, at least of yourself and maybe of others. What kind of character does it take to be a leader in today's consumer spaces? What does integrity look like? What does honesty look like? And what does courage look like with all the change that is going on in our world today? It's a serious one.
Well, I guess I'll start on the courage part. I think one of the biggest lessons I learned is to have what I call managerial courage and being able to speak up when you know something's not right. And it's hard, especially when you might be the only woman in the room and this subject is sensitive. You can never let that time pass without making a comment. But I'll give you another example. So I was promoted to, the first time I had a team of buyers working for me. And the president of the company had promoted me, and he made it a point once a year to sit in and evaluate everyone's performance appraisals. So he said, it would be great, since you've just inherited a new team, why don't you sit in when I review the performance appraisals of your team with your boss? I said, okay. So I figured I'm going to be sitting in the corner just listening and absorbing. So my boss at the time, he went through every performance review, and everybody was fabulous. Everybody was wonderful. There was nothing wrong with anybody, nothing to work on. And I had worked for the team for about a month, and one of the things that I think I've always been good at is kind of getting a gut for people's potential and what the opportunities. So I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, well, and my little thought bubble above my head was, that's not what I think, that's not what I think. So the president of the company says, well, Lorna, what do you think? Puts me on the spot. What would you do? I'm thinking, crap, what do I do if I don't, if I just want to please and be quiet and don't say anything, I'm going to be hung with that, perception that I didn't understand the qualities of my team. So I very respectfully said, well, with a lot of asterisks, I've only worked with the team for, a short period of time, but here's what I see, strengths, weaknesses, etc. And the president of the company took the file of appraisals that my boss had written and threw it at him and said, she's been here for 30 days on the job and she's written a better performance appraisal than you have, so go change them. Well, that was great. The president, was testing me, obviously. But when I came down after that, my boss was none too happy with me. And I said, Bob, if you were sitting in my chair, that was the test. The president of the company was asking my opinion, and I gave it to you as respectfully as I could, but I stand by what I said. So it was a very difficult day, but I was right to stick to my guns and to say what I did, and that's exactly what the president of the company was looking for, is did I have the guts? Because he knew how I felt. So those are the kind of tests that you're given, and my instinct was, say what is on your mind, do it in a respectful way, but don't walk out of that room without saying what you believe in.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add to that?
It was excellent. I just want to say honesty, I think, is important in any business you're in, because once you lose that, whether it's your vendors, your customers, your employees, you'll never have that relationship again. So honesty is so important. And another thing I just want to mention is the courage to change, because this world right now changes so fast that if you're not thinking about the next thing or trying to foresee the next year, it's going to pass you by, and you might not do the right thing. And so you really have to have the courage to look forward a lot. You can assess what happened in the past, but you have to be able to take the risk and do something different, to make something happen in the future.
I like to say that you have to have a bias for action, because a lot of times people are so worried about perfection, right? You're waiting, you want to make sure it's perfect. If you wait for it's perfect, there is no such thing as perfect. You need to move and have the courage to move, and even if you get 50% of it right or 60% of it right, at least you've moved forward that 50 or 60%, and then you can evolve and change. So, sitting back and waiting to make sure everything is just exactly right, that day you won't be very successful. You have to have that bias for action, because at least you're moving the business forward. And I would just echo what you said about honesty and integrity. When I think back after my career, the thing I'm most proud of is how I treated people. My reputation in the business and with my fellow employees, that to me is the most important thing. Yeah, it was great to drive a business and grow the profits, but when it comes down to it, I'm most proud of how I treated people and respected people and did business with people.
Thank you. Well, do you want to comment? Does anybody else want to comment before we go to the next question? Okay, great. Well, I do have one more question. We're thinking about when we look to the future, right? You worry about, well, if you're a junior, you're worried about what you'll do for your internship, and if you're a sophomore, you worry about what classes to take, and if you're a senior, you worry about if you'll get a job. And it just seems like, there's an environment of scarcity out there, right? There's stuff to worry about. You're not doing your job if you're not worrying, right? And maybe, your parents will even do it for you if you don't worry. But anyway, the truth of it is, too, there's a lot of abundance out there. And if you allow yourself to embrace the abundance in the world, maybe things would be easier. So I'd like to know, would anyone like to comment on the planning we're expected to do and how to balance that with just taking action? And, what does it mean to have an abundant mindset?
I think that's something I struggled with, especially over the summer when I was interning at a financial institution. I felt like I was so raised early on to do something traditional and just go to school, make money, just because my family wasn't so financially stable. And so that was really encouraged with me early on. And so I remember being in New York City. I was making good money, and I was in New York City. It was just something that I always wanted to do. And then I was there and I wasn't happy. I had no clue why I wasn't happy, because I was I was doing the right thing. I was going to school, getting good grades, and I'm making good money. But it just didn't make me happy. And I just had to know that I didn't know what my true purpose was. And I remember flying out on a weekend to New Hampshire, going on this retreat, and it was to find my purpose. And the first thing we did was a death meditation. And at first, I thought she said depth meditation. And then she's like, 12 hours from now, you're gonna die. And I'm like, I don't wanna do this now. So I just wanted to read some things out my journal. And I feel like that will help you all a lot too, just trying to like really figure out what you wanna do. Because I don't think we ask ourselves why enough. Like, for instance, like, oh, I'm gonna get grades, and sometimes you ask like, sometimes I just don't ask why I'm going. I mean, it's good to go for the A, but sometimes ask why and look back at your family and seeing why that's being enforced in your life. Are you just doing it because other people are telling you to do it, or are you doing it because you want to do it? So for the death meditation, it was like a half day, so I'm not gonna go through all that, and it's Wednesday, and I don't want anyone to feel that. So one of the questions was thinking about things that held me back. And like you first think about resources, I don't have enough money to do this, but for me it was like a lot of mental things, like I'm too young to do this, and I think a lot of people in college are like, I'm too young to do this, or I don't have the experience to do that. And so I just realized a lot of things in my life were mental. And I think especially as women, we overthink things, and we always wait for things to be perfect, and it's never going to be perfect because we always like think about what's gonna hold us back. So that was one thing. So really think about like things that have held you back. And on the flip side, going back to the abundance question, thinking about if you had all the money in the world, you were rich already, and you didn't fail, like what would you do? And that completely changed my perspective on everything, because I was always taught to be traditional, get good grades and go to school, and like get a good job. But I never was taught that if you were able to achieve anything, what would you do? And it was funny because I was like, you know, it'd be good to have a lot of money and like not have student loans. But then I was like, I have no clue on what I want to do. And I think most people don't have an idea, and I think that's really unfortunate. So I think it's so important to think about what you want to do and that why you want to do that. So I think that just goes back to the abundance and just knowing that everyone's definition of abundance is different. Like I can't judge someone for saying that their abundance is having a lot of money, because their abundance is different, whereas my abundance is really, for me, I feel good when people tell me that I've helped them or that they love what I'm doing. So I think it's important to really reflect on what's important to you. And because if you're living other people's dreams, especially like with my parents, they always told me to be a doctor or a lawyer. And it was just that they were doing it for the best of them because they weren't financially stable, but what's the best for them is not the best for you. So really just think about that, and I think that's so important, especially with going into different majors. And like I always question things that I want to do, and that's not bad. I think it's so important to question those things.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak to abundance? What does it mean to you?
I mean, I think for me, like, you know, the number of people I see come into my store on a daily basis and realize, like, you know, they'll share their problems with you because sometimes you're their therapist, even though you just met them. That's okay. You know, but it does make you realize, like, some of the problems you think you have are so small and so minor compared to some of the other heavy things that people are dealing with. And, you know, I personally feel like I have a very abundant life. You know, my family's healthy. You know, my husband is fairly healthy, although he ruptured his Achilles recently, so that's not been going so well. But, you know, but even that, I came home and talked to him about one of my customers who at 35 had to have both her hips replaced already, and he was like, okay, I feel better already. You know, I mean, it's just like, if you understand, like, you know, focus on other people and what they're going through, empathy, and then it makes kind of what you're dealing with seem so minor and easy. And the more you put yourself out there, whether it's in, you know, jobs or, you know, friendships, relationships, you know, you're going to realize that there's a lot of heavy stuff out there that people have to deal with, and you're in a position, you know, to help them, and you need to take advantage of those opportunities, because again, it goes back to it's the little things that you can do for people that mean the most.
Thank you.
I might give a real quick example of Monday evening. I was in Minneapolis, and my son-in-law started a foundation. He's 35 years old. And the foundation's called the Star Foundation, and it's to raise money for children that are special needs. He has a daughter that was born with some special needs that are somewhat minor, but he found out real quickly it's super expensive to get that help early on. They were fortunate enough, and they realized it, that they could do this and take their child to this wonderful school, St. David's. But he started the foundation because he saw the need for all the other children that were there, and that the families were struggling so hard. Some of them could barely make ends meet at home, but the kids really should be there. So I think that's a real good example of abundance, where if you have the resources or the inclination, maybe you're not the money person, maybe you're just the person that pulls this together, but to do something that's kind of dear to your heart that then reaches out and helps other people in the community, you know, whether it's women or children or whatever, to make that well-being out there in the community a notch better.
Thank you very much. I think at this point, I bet you have questions. So I'm going to let you have a little time to think and maybe pose some questions to our panel. Or comments, anything.
Yeah.
Say whatever you want. Yes?
I have a question, and I guess it's related to abundance, but kind of in more of a positive light. Sometimes I feel, and I'm sure a lot of people who are in this room who are like going through college and seeing a lot of opportunity all around them. Like me personally, I have an abundance of interests, but I feel like there's not enough, like a time in a day to do everything. And as like you've all mentioned, like do everything perfectly. So how do you kind of deal with those trade-offs of having a lot of interests and wanting to pursue all of them, and whether that's going around careers or exploring different passions, but how do you manage all of those interests to make sure that you're living a life that you feel happy and fulfilled with, but also like meeting deadlines and, putting food on the table?
I guess I'd answer it this way. I think people who are driven and have a lot of passion, a lot of times have a lot of interest. And I think one of the toughest things is to say no to some things. That you can't do it all because you've stressed yourself out because you're trying to do 15 things and you don't do any of them as well as you want, but you like all 15 things. So I think the toughest thing I learned as I was taking on more responsibility, a lot of times in a company you get to be the go-to person because you are the person that gets stuff done, but at a certain point you have to choose to say, I want to do these 3 things and do it really well, and saying no to things is probably the toughest thing. And you feel like it's a failure, like, well, I should be able to do all those things, I can get it all accomplished, but it's actually better if you can say no and prioritize. You'll be happier and you'll be more successful in the things you do choose to put your energy behind. So it's okay to say no to some things.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Well, I think we're going to have some time, some social time after, to meet each other and get to talk to our panelists a little more. So I think I'll wrap up with kind of the things that are, lighting up in my mind, are just kind of feeling re-inspired, maybe to really remember that the little exchange, not the little, but the personal exchanges you have in your day-to-day life are probably going to be what really add up to, how you look back, and everything kind of is rooted in those moments. And having a sense of abundance, it is good. I mean, I hate to say this, but you know, that deathbed contemplation is not a bad thing to keep you on track. Like, you know, what will I care about on that day? So a little morbid to be a send-off for snacks. But anyway, I hope that you'll all have a chance to get to know someone that you don't know before. I hope you'll follow the 4W Initiative on Twitter or Facebook. We're really eager to do more in this idea of engaging with leaders in the consumer space over time, and we're still figuring out what that looks like. So if you as students are interested, seek us out. We're thinking about ways to make the bigger companies jobs and pathways to a healthy life for people. We're thinking about transformative careers like you've seen here with social entrepreneurship. And we're thinking about intentional and conscious consumerism that can make the world better as three kind of dimensions of where we want to be working with 4W. So just, you know, have that in mind, and we're there to talk with you. With that, I want to give a huge shout out and thanks to Jerry O'Brien, who's one of our 4W Leadership Circle members, and he's very creative to think with and has really inspired me. I went, and he's very also, he makes you feel, you know, it's a safe space to talk about retail with Jerry. You know, I thought this is not my space at all, and I came away realizing, wait a minute, you know, my first job was at Sears. I think about how I was treated, the skills I learned. I still use some of those skills today. And, you know, that part of our lives and what people's first job means. And it started to, you know, get me really excited about doing more and thinking more about this space. And so I'm probably going to visit all your stores soon. And I hope you all do too. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jerry to wrap up our session.
I've had the good pleasure of knowing these ladies for a long time in different capacities. Lorna talked about courage. She actually was part of the group that hired me, so, you know, there you go.
Now that's talking courage.
And I've gotten to know Rita over the last couple of years since she's been on campus. She was assigned to me as a mentor, so again, maybe she's got more courage than you know that she still meets with me. So, but you know, these are busy ladies who took time to do this. I'm incredibly grateful when people are willing to reach back. And they, you know, we opened up about cheap lessons, but a big part of, you know, getting to other stages in your life is to remember to reach back. It's incredibly critical to me. When everybody here said yes, as soon as there was a question, you know, let me check my calendar, but then I got a yes. And honestly, you talk about not having it planned out perfectly. I think Lori and I did this on shorter notice than I ever do anything like this. So I've learned to do, and then still I got all these yeses. So please thank our guests today.